This is the story of the empire's darkest, most open secret. A secret that was perfectly legal, socially accepted, and brutally enforced. This is the story of the pure Delicatus, the delicate boy. He was a child, a teenager ripped from his family and thrust into a gilded cage. His life was not his own. His body was not his own. For in the shadows of the Forum, and in the lavish bedrooms of the Roman elite, a silent horror played out. This is the horrifying true story of the young slave boys used as sex slaves in ancient Rome. Our story begins in the bustling, heartless chaos of the slave market. Among the thousands of captives from Gaul, Greece, and Asia Minor, a specific category was highly prized: adolescent boys. They were selected for their beauty, fair skin, delicate features, smooth limbs. They were the pueri delicati. Imagine a boy we'll call Lucius. A year ago he was playing in the hills of Thessaly. Then the legions came. His village was burned, his family killed or enslaved. Now he stands on a wooden platform, naked, as a wealthy Roman senator named Gaius examines his teeth, his muscles, and his other attributes. The deal is struck. Lucius is no longer a person. He is property. His new title is the pure Delicatus of Senator Gaius. His purpose is to be a living ornament, a status symbol, and a vessel for his master's pleasure. He is bathed, perfumed, and dressed in fine silken tunics. He is given the best food, a soft bed, and an education in poetry and music. This was the gilded cage. But the price for this luxury was his body, his autonomy, and his childhood. The Roman poet Martial wrote openly about his own pure Delicatus, named Erotion. He writes poems mourning her death, calling her sweetheart and darling. It seems tender until you remember the power dynamic. This was not a father's love. This was a master's ownership. The line between cherished pet and sexual object was terrifyingly thin. Lucius's days followed a grim routine. By day he was a personal attendant, pouring wine, carrying scrolls, fanning his master. He was a public display of Gaius's wealth and taste. But by night the doors closed. The parties ended. And the true horror began. The abuse was not a secret, shameful act. It was an accepted, even expected, part of the relationship. Roman society operated on a strict principle of penetration and power. To penetrate was to be dominant, masculine, powerful. To be penetrated was to be submissive, feminine, and weak. For a Roman elite like Gaius, using his slave boy for sex was as normal as using him to carry a message. The historian Suetonius records that the Emperor Tiberius kept troops of young boys, whom he called his little fishes, and trained them to swim between his legs and perform sexual acts in his pool. The abuse was systematic, casual, and cruel. Imagine Lucius's psychological state. He is a teenager, grappling with his own changing body and emerging sexuality, but it is being violently co-opted by an old man he despises and fears. He is trapped. To resist meant a beating, torture, or being sold to a gladiatorial school, a death sentence. His survival depended on his ability to dissociate, to pretend, to let his body be used while his mind tried to escape. The Roman writer Petronius, in his satirical novel The Satyricon, depicts this world with brutal honesty. The character Encolpius moves through a society where older, wealthy men constantly prey on young, attractive boys. It was a world where a boy's beauty was both his greatest asset and his greatest curse. But time moves forward, even in a gilded cage. Lucius is no longer the smooth-cheeked, delicate boy he once was. His body is changing. And in the eyes of his master he is losing his value. The pure Delicatus had an expiration date. His entire identity was built on a transient, adolescent beauty. Once that faded, he became a problem. What was a master to do with a grown man who had been trained for nothing but pleasure? Some were kept on as household managers or freed out of a twisted sense of loyalty. But many were cast aside like a used toy. They could be sold to harder labor, to the mines or the farms where they would likely die within a year. They could be discarded, left to fend for themselves on the streets of Rome, where their specific skills often led them to prostitution. For Lucius the day comes. Senator Gaius has found a new favorite. Lucius is told to gather his few belongings. The gilded cage is opening not to freedom, but to an even more uncertain and terrifying future. The collar is removed, only to be replaced by the chains of a chain gang heading to the Sicilian grain fields. His protection is gone. The abuse he endured for years has left him with nothing. This was the ultimate betrayal. After years of service, of surrendering his body and his dignity, he was discarded the moment he ceased to be desirable. He was a human commodity and his shelf life was over. We look at the beautiful artifacts of Rome, the statues, the poems, the frescoes, and we see an advanced, sophisticated culture. But we must learn to see the ghosts in the marble. The story of Lucius is the story of countless thousands of boys whose childhoods were stolen. Their suffering was legal. It was normalized. It was a pillar holding up the very society we so often romanticize. This history is not just a dark curiosity. It is a stark lesson about power, and the human capacity to justify almost any cruelty when it is dressed in the robes of tradition and privilege. It forces us to ask, what practices do we accept today that future generations will look back on with the same horror? The Roman Empire is long gone. But the echoes of those silent, suffering boys still whisper to us from the ruins. They remind us that true civilization is not measured by its monuments, but by how it treats its most vulnerable. And by that measure, for all its glory, Rome was a profound and tragic failure.